In my experience, introverted feeling is one of the most difficult functions to define. I'll try to give an overview of some of the common ways it's described, just to paint a broad picture. One way I like to think about FI is with this notion of implicit values. There are different ways to value something. One way to value something is because it's useful or has utility. You value a tool because it helps you get the job done. Then there are things we value just because we like them, we have a preference for them, because they make us feel good on some instinctive level. I'm going to ask you all a question. It's going to be a hypothetical scenario, and I'd love to hear your answers down below in the comments. A while back, me and my ENTP friend had a discussion about the concept of justice. I said to him, imagine the following scenario. Someone who lives alone, has no friends or family that will miss them, is murdered. No one will be affected by this person's death, since they were a recluse and weren't in contact with anyone. In this hypothetical scenario, we know for a fact the person who committed the murder would never commit another crime, and would in fact go on to be an extremely productive member of society. Someone who ended up helping a huge number of people. No one would know about this case, meaning it wouldn't act as a deterrent either. The question is, would you put this person in jail for the crime they committed? My ENTP friend's answer was no. He said, if this guy isn't a danger to society and is not going to commit any more crimes, is going to be a force for immense good in the world, and there are no family members, friends, or people to experience any grief over the crime, then putting this person in jail is pointless, and in fact a net negative for society. So that's one answer. But here is the alternative answer to that. I value the concept of justice and punishment. They should be put in jail for their crime. Now, I don't think your answer to this question would indicate any function, although your reasoning behind your answer might. But this does highlight a distinction between a utilitarian approach that prioritizes the greater good versus valuing something implicitly, such as the concept of justice or punishment, regardless of whether those things result in a greater good. One approach values something because of what it brings about, and the other approach values something because of what it is. Another example might be free speech. Do you think it's good because speaking freely and openly about ideas lets the best ideas win and brings us closer to the truth? Or would you value it even if you knew for a fact that things would be worse off if there were more free speech? I associate introverted feeling with having strong implicit values. These things are obviously going to be different for each person, hence it also being associated with individualism. This is a natural follow-on from having values. To an extent, what we believe, our principles, define us and also motivate us. Even types that have third slot FI, so INTJs and ISTJs, and types that have FI inferior, so ENTJs and ESTJs, are strongly driven by and motivated by certain values and beliefs, although sometimes it can be harder to spot them in those types. High introverted feeling users are going to come across as idiosyncratic or even eccentric sometimes. They can often have a surprising and unusual array of beliefs, opinions, principles, values. These things influence them greatly and make them highly individual. Introverted thinking versus introverted feeling. I've described TI users in the past as creating a logical framework over the course of their life from which they can make decisions. The same is true for high FI users, but instead of it being a logical framework, it's more of a value-based framework, and a very personalized one at that. So when making a decision or reaching some kind of crossroads in their life, they can ask themselves, does this line up with my values or not? It's a guide for them, a means of navigating through times of uncertainty, a compass. They can simply ask themselves, does this feel right to me or not? And if that sounds like a weird question to ask, you might be a TI user. High FI users often know themselves very well, what they stand for, who they are. That actually affords them a lot of control over themselves, but on the flip side of that, they might find other people kind of difficult to control, or even just deal with in general. Being misunderstood is kind of a perpetual FI problem. Extroverted feeling versus introverted feeling. In some ways, this is a distinction between the independent and the collective. High FI users strive for, appreciate, and actively seek out authenticity in other people, especially when it comes to their close and personal relationships. It's possible that a high FI user would see a high FE user as being somewhat insincere, inauthentic, or disingenuous. They can have a real feeling of skepticism towards the FE approach to life. High FE users, on the other hand, might see high FI users as potentially being selfish or intentionally going against the group harmony or consensus for weird reasons. There can actually be a great deal of misunderstandings and miscommunication between HighFe and Fi users for those reasons. In my experience, HighFi users for some reason tend to be more moved by stories or the plights of individuals or maybe small groups, whereas HighFe users tend to prioritize the greater good in a more nebulous sense. Can Fi be anything? So this is an idea that has probably crossed the mind of anyone who has spent any time analysing typology in detail. If introverted feeling is something associated with having strong values, then those values could be anything. So in theory, a HighFi user might greatly value logic. One Fi user might value avoiding seeking power because they think it's corrupting in some way, whereas another HighFi user might actively seek it out just because they value it. So it's not obvious that Fi has to be oriented in a particular direction. I'll pose another question to the people in the comment section. Does this technically mean that Fi is one of the most versatile functions and one that can manifest in the greatest variety of ways? As always, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Feel free to follow me and Luan on our other social media links, which are down in the description, and check out our Discord server. We have plenty of Fi on there.